I think the best word to describe motherhood, or a series of words, is full on. The idea of having to do my job at the same time as looking after a newborn baby kind of bursts every kind of brain cell I've got. Just doing your toes. Right. Hi, my name's Claire Newell, and I'm the investigations editor at the Telegraph. This is my first ever podcast. Welcome to the Juggling Act. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been interviewing women at the top of their industries to find out how they found returning to work since having a baby. I've always had a really busy job as an investigative journalist, and I've loved it. But since having a baby, I started to get a bit worried. Could I still be such a good journalist and look after our son? I've been back at work now for a couple of months, and the truth is, it is actually really hard sometimes. Today I'm interviewing Baroness Ruby McGregor-Smith. Her children are now in their 20s. On the face of it, Ruby seems to have it all. She's got this absolutely stellar career. She was a top executive at Serco and then became chief executive at facilities company Mighty. On top of that, she's now in the House of Lords. She's a really high-profile British businesswoman, and I want to ask her, what's it really been like? How did she really find the juggle of all of those worlds? And what can she teach me? Maybe she's got some advice. What was it like when you found out you were pregnant?
I think it was really difficult because certainly I was the first female at my level to have to say those words, "Oh, I'm pregnant." And for those that have never, when you've never been pregnant, actually saying the words "I'm pregnant" are quite hard words to say, particularly to a rather male orientated leadership team.
I've definitely found that hard working in a newsroom. So where were you working then?
So when I first got pregnant with my daughter, I was working at Serco's just as I was about to have a big promotion, found out I was pregnant with my daughter. And that certainly changed the way I guess I started to think about my career from that point onwards.
So before the pregnancy, did you work long hours? Did you travel a lot?
Yeah, I know. So when you're growing a business as quickly as we were growing Serco, it was really long hours and it was away a lot. So I was away, or I was overseas quite a lot. We were growing businesses in Australia, in the US and Middle East and Far East. And so we were going abroad quite regularly. I was away probably once a month or more on different contract negotiations. And when I was in the office, it was quite long days. You'd be there till past midnight quite regularly.
Yes. So what happened when you came back to work after having your daughter?
When I then came back, it was really quite difficult because I took the view, which I think in hindsight was wrong, that things could carry on, that things could be quite normal. So I thought, no, I can go back to work full time quite soon. And that was probably my first mistake because I'd underestimated A, how tired I was going to be, B, the fact that suddenly everything had to be planned and supported, and that this assumed my baby would always be well, for example, or not stay up all night, as they do occasionally, quite a lot in my case. And so I found it very difficult. Lack of sleep was my big issue. How do people get through that? It really was, for me, very, very difficult. But also the fact that I suddenly had to plan everything and things couldn't be spontaneous. And so I found that quite hard. And like many women, I certainly struggle with a real lack of confidence around that period about how do I adapt? I've always been one thing and suddenly I've got to be something else.
Do you think there's a big identity shift that takes place?
For the individual?
Yes.
There was for me. Suddenly you're a mum. Yeah, it's quite a big thing to say. Actually,
it is a big thing to say.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure I wanted to say that. I didn't really know how to say it again. It comes, I think, gradually though, and it takes time for you to adjust, but it takes time for others to adjust as well. And I found that quite hard. I found that adjustment of perception of me quite difficult. And despite the fact I'm this kind of outward-going individual, when I was a child, I was quite painfully shy, and there's certain things I don't like to really discuss. And one of them is how I'm personally feeling. But I think it's really important to, because I think if we don't, then people don't really get it.
How did you learn to do that?
Oh, I'm still not great at it all the time. I think it comes in waves. But I think as you get older, you begin to say, well, if I don't say it now, I'm never going to say it. So you do start to be a bit more open about what you feel.
How much time did you take off when you had your son?
I had about 6 months and then went back. But again, that wasn't great. And so what happened was, after about a year of trying to juggle all of this, and clearly I was still doing a global role at the time, so I was still having to go abroad potentially. When my little boy was 3 weeks old, he got really, really ill with what was at the time a very bad flu epidemic for newborns. And so he was very unusually ill with that. And so we had a rather traumatic time about whether or not he would actually live.
Oh, how awful.
And I think, therefore, that really changed things, because what I realised then was that, you go through thinking, right, I really want children. I can, my goodness me, I've got through the birth. I've got through the 9 months. And then you don't really expect that to hit you 3 weeks later. And that, for my husband and I, was probably a point where we thought we need to do things differently. And then I was wrapped back up in some major work at Serco and thought, this isn't really going to work, because we've both got big careers and one of us needs to do something differently, but also I needed some time. So I did what most people never do at a really senior level, was I just thought, you know what, it's time to take some time off. So I did.
And how much did you take?
So I stopped when the kids were 2 and 4. So I did about a year and a half after my son was born. And then I took off. I worked part-time effectively for almost 2 years. I think, one of the things I've really pushed for over my career has been that understanding that women do need time out, that you need, and actually the guys do too. When you become a new family, in whatever family unit you're creating, you need some time to really adapt as individuals, as a family unit, to becoming a family, and having the pressure of that in itself is quite big, let alone career pressure. And so I've always very, very much advocated for women to take a lot longer off than that. And I certainly wouldn't advocate anyone to do what I did. I learned when I had my second child 2.5 years later and took more time off because I realised I needed to. My goodness me, when you have your second, it's a lot more work than you probably realise again. And it was only when my son was going to go to full-time school that I thought, well, actually, things are going to change again. My goodness me, they're a bit older, and it's not maybe quite the right time, but I maybe want to think about whether I go back and do more. And at that point, I decided to join Mighty as CFO.
Okay. And how did it work, if it's not kind of too much of a personal question, say with breastfeeding? I don't know whether you breastfed your children, with going back to work so quickly. Because it's definitely, I think, a consideration for going back, just even with me coming here today, having to kind of find a room and pump at various points. I feel like this is a kind of very undignified way of living, being a cow.
I think it's about what you can and can't do in personal choice, and having to just deal with that and deal with all those changes, I think, can be quite difficult. The good news is you'll get through that phase.
Yes. Thankfully, it doesn't go on forever.
Yeah.
And just thinking about your confidence point, why do you think women lose confidence when they're out of the workplace?
I'm really not an expert, but I can only talk from personal experience. For some who are very used to social interaction, you have a lot more time to think by yourself and to dwell. And you're also, as a new mum, even if you don't think you're stressed, you won't have had the same sleep patterns. And all of these things we know can knock confidence in some way, shape or form. They certainly did for me. But I think for me, it was the fact that I wasn't seeing people as often, which is why I think a gradual return to work program is really good to get you in, to get you back used to seeing how you can work differently. And when I was back for a while, I was fine, but it just took me some time. And a lot of women do think, oh my God, are we still going to be relevant when we go back? Are we still going to be able to flex the way we did? Are we still going to be able to do the things we did? Well, maybe not, but we've got to help them realise that is a very standard way for everyone to feel. There is no thing in my book as some supermother that can have it all for all together. I've always said you can absolutely have an amazing career and have kids. You may not be able to do it all at the same time, but you can do it. But equally so, there will be times in your life when your children will simply be your biggest priority, and there'll be times when you'll be able to spend time more in your career. That is what being a mum is all about, and it's okay to be able to do both. But don't expect some dream world, because there is no dream out there. I mean, I know no one that has found it easy.
I wonder if it's in part about almost being out of practice. So, I've taken 8 months off work and then coming back. Sounds like a silly thing to say, but can I still write stories? Can I still do interviews? Can I still come up with ideas? I haven't done that for 8 months, so perhaps I fear that I can't anymore.
Yeah, and I think it's all around when you get back, you realise things haven't changed that much. But actually, we're also, I don't know about you, but certainly if I was at home all day with a baby, it seemed to take me a lot longer to get anything done. And then when you get back, you realise you've got to do everything really, really quickly because you've got to get home for this baby, and you probably become more effective and you learn to juggle your time better. We're also not used, when you've had your first baby, there is a lot to juggle. And although you've juggled a lot before, you've not juggled you've got no planning. Baby's ill, baby needs feeding, baby needs entertaining, baby won't stop crying, whatever it may be. You are constantly, depending on on the kind of baby you have, you're learning. You're learning how, and you're learning to be a mum as well. And so you're trying to do it all together. And to begin with, I think that can be quite hard for many, but it does get easier the more you do it. Oh, completely. It does do. And you go through waves of it feeling different. But yes, it will do. You'll be very different in 5 years.
I hope so. I have found something you said at the beginning, actually, about planning. So with my job, before having a baby, I'd be able to say, yeah, I can get on that flight to Texas tonight. I can go to Egypt tomorrow. Oh, I could drive up to Scotland. Now, I can't really do any of that because my first question would be, where's he going to sleep? I'm not sure he can come with me. And for a start, he doesn't have a passport yet. And so it's logistically quite hard.
Yes, it is, but it will come in time. And actually, it needs to be a little bit hard to begin with because as you'll find, your little boy will expect you to be there. And so it's that transition of you being able to be away and feeling comfortable with being away. And it will come, but it's tough. It's really tough. And logistically, I had to accept I couldn't do everything I could do before. And then it was okay. Once I'd actually got used to the fact that I had to do it differently, I thought, right, there's got to be a few ways around this. How can I make this work? And you start to adapt, and it keeps adapting. Because just when you think you've got it under control again, something else changes, like your job would change, or something would change.
Well, the baby was sleeping, and now it's not sleeping.
Well, wait till you get through. You got teething. I mean, that was a traumatic time, I recall. But then you'll get something else. Then they'll
get chicken pox.
Oh well, they've all got to get that. Yeah. So you'll get used to illnesses. Yes.
Yes.
And then you'll get more ill because you've not had these bugs since you were tiny, and suddenly you realise that they're the ones who are infecting you with things you've not really been used to be. Yeah. So you'll get all of that as well. But it gets better after they're 5 from memory.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think if you have any more as well, once they're over 5, they can entertain themselves a bit more.
Yes. And did you feel that you suffered with the crisis of confidence when you went back to work after having the children?
Yeah, no, I certainly did. And I found it quite hard when I went back. And I didn't have anyone I really spoke to about it, which I think was part of the challenge. I think if I'd spoken to lots of people who said, this is completely normal, I would have been a lot better, but I didn't. And I certainly got that wrong. And I think if I had spoken to people who'd said, well, what else did you expect it to be like? It's okay. and I'd shared that a bit more, I think that would have helped me. And I didn't share it, and I should have done. And I advocate to all women, just go and talk to someone if you're not feeling great. Ask for help, actually say, I need support. It's okay to say that. And clearly I worked in workplaces where you weren't sure if you should say that. Absolutely say it, because everyone assumes, and I always felt this as a chief exec, everyone assumes that you know everything. Employers don't. Until you tell them, why would they know? I used to say, well, no one's told me that. I might be the chief exec of this group, but I wasn't actually made aware. People assume that you know too much as you get more senior. You don't. You need to tell people. And I think employers have got better as well, because certainly there are more women networks now. You've got more women you can talk to. And something I've always encouraged is for employers to have something specific for new mums in particular, where they can go and get some advice on the smallest things. And you get organisations today that will say, look, this is the best way of managing childcare. This is the best route to think about for nursery, etc. So that you've got a bit more support as you get more senior, because you need it.
And was one of the problems that you worked in a very male environment? Do you think that stopped you from talking about it?
I think so. I think I did talk to a couple of the guys about it, who I've worked with. And I've certainly always talked to my teams about it, the people who work for me. But I have worked in a very male-orientated industry. They've just got used to talking about all these things. So you get people used to it. When I finally realised I just had no choice but to open up. Now I don't know, then I never stopped talking about it once I started. So I think it's all around just in yourself feeling comfortable that you can be someone that it's not perfect.
And so then you joined Mighty. So by now the children were kind of school age by the sounds of it.
They were now 4 and 6 when I joined Mighty as CFO in 2002. And the only complication there was that, it was a UK group, so that was good because I didn't really want to travel abroad. But they were based in Bristol and I was based in the southeast, so I was down there quite a lot. So I did a lot of commuting. It was a big juggle and a lot of driving.
And did you, when you were at work, say, for example, it gets to 6 o'clock and you think, oh, God, I've got to pick up the kids or be at home to tuck them in for bedtime. Did you feel guilty standing up from your desk and saying, I've got to leave now?
No, because I wanted to see them. And I would juggle things around so much, and I took huge amounts of work home with me to do after they were in bed. So my view was, you got to flex, you got to do it your own way. I had a great CEO I worked for who was really quite understanding and said, look, it will get easier when you're filled with immense guilt all the time that you're never making anyone happy. And it certainly did. And he and my first chairman said to me, look, by the time the kids are 8 and 10, you'll want to do more. And I was like, no way. I can't come out of this phase. I can't see that. But they were completely right. And I became chief executive when the kids were 8 and 10. But it only worked then when my husband stopped doing what he did.
So he stopped
when I became chief exec.
Oh, I see. And how did you work that out between you?
Well, it was kind of a choice, really, of which one was going to do less. Because if I was going to take on a role like that, unless he had given me that level of support, I think I wouldn't have been able to do it. I wasn't. It was about confidence was one point, but secondly, I needed to know that if I was going to be late or if something else happened, that he was always going to be around.
And before he took a step back from his career, was it difficult to negotiate that? As you say, if he's travelling and you're travelling and someone needs to pick up the kids, does that lead to kind of tense conversations?
Good grief, yeah. Well, hey, look, every relationship is entertaining at times, but no, we would certainly have a few of those. And I was always someone that worried a huge amount about those very small things around the kids, and he would worry a bit less. But therefore, I needed one of us around, and so I would do most of it. And hey, look, as they've grown up, there's I'm sure they would say I've still done a lot of it, but it was never. I don't think you ever get this perfect 50-50 sharing anyway, because you're both different people and you think about raising kids differently.
And what kind of things would you worry about?
Me, it would just be, Are they missing me? Is it okay? Are they eating the right food? Have they done their homework? Have they done this? All those really small things. And, I must get back for when they were small for bath time. I need to be back to say goodnight to them. I didn't like that I didn't see them in the morning. When you get into all this networking at work and it's more senior, how many of these networking events are breakfasts or dinners? And I didn't want to do that. So I didn't do very many of those, to be fair.
And did that make you feel vulnerable if you're saying, I can't come to that 8 a.m. meeting, or I can't go to that weekend because I've got to see the kids? Did that make you feel like, oh, God, I might get sacked?
You never know what you're going to feel. I think it made me worry about people's perceptions occasionally. But I think you just got to muddle through. And you just have to accept it's going to make you feel all these things, but you've got to do what's right by you and what's right by your family. When I first became CFO and we had a shareholder roadshow to do, and I was really worried because it was my first one ever in the city. And I was particularly worried because my son was in the nativity play that year, and he was the lead part. And clearly that may not happen again. So I had this one-off opportunity, whether I saw him in the nativity play, but I had all these shareholder meetings. And I was really worried about it. I thought, okay, it's going to be videoed, but I can't really miss the meeting. And I mentioned it to my chief exec, and he said, no, you've got to go, because it's the only one. It's the only one you will get where he's doing that part. And I said, are you sure? He went, you're going to be going through hundreds of these meetings. You're going to miss 2. It's okay. I'll do them. And forever I will appreciate him doing that, because it was, because ultimately I did hundreds of those meetings over the years, over a 14-year period of my team. And it was something I always remember, because it was something that I always thought, no, I must make sure all my teams make sure they tell me that, look, if there's something really critical that's going to be a bit of a one-off in their child's life, they need to get to it. Sports days are important. Getting there for... getting to pick them up is important. The memories at the school gates are important. The things that matter to them are going to be different to what you realise. But but I always specifically remember that one occasion thinking, I clearly was worried that I shouldn't do it, but he was like, that's fine. And that's what management teams need to remember. They influence so much of that in an organisation that they've got to say, look, if it's important, go to things we can cover for you. Because quite frankly, that can be done.
Yes, and I guess if a company decides this is the way that we're going to behave and support people, that it would give room for potentially everybody in that organisation to be able to go to their children's sports days or nativity.
And I think that's one of the reasons I was so passionate about bringing in more flexibility with the government, was saying if you could flex on roles, you should, around family commitments. As long as you deliver the output you need to deliver, that's fine. And, we can deliver so much more nowadays with remote working technology anyway, that I also think it engenders a real sense of loyalty in individuals, where if you support them through when they've had families, I think they're incredibly loyal to what you've helped them achieve. And if you've helped them flourish in the workplace when they've got a family, I think that's incredibly important. And I remember one conversation with one of our subsidiary HR directors who came to see me who'd had two children. And she was clearly finding things quite tough. And I said, well, go and have a sabbatical. Take a year out. Come back. Job's here. If you want some time out, go and take some time out. And she did. And good on her. And when she came back, it was great. So, but my point is flexibility. It's like, it's okay to go through those ups and downs as a mum. It's okay to turn up to whoever you're working for and go, do you know what? This isn't quite right. Let's find a way through it together. And
what do you think the government or whoever else need to do to support women or families when they have children?
I think my big piece has always been around flexible working. It's around make things more flexible where you can, and also where we can improve childcare provision and give people as much choice as they can get. Now, clearly, when I was chairing the Women's Business Council, we were really focused on free childcare support for certain age groups. For those that do want to come back to work, the fact that their childcare costs are too prohibitive for some, I think is really unfair. So I think the fact that we've introduced up to 30 hours free childcare is great. But it could be argued it may not go wide enough at the moment. And I'm very focused on how can we get everyone to fulfil their potential. If the barrier is childcare, we've got to help find a way through that barrier. If the barrier is flexibility, we've got to find the way through. I just want to see women at a senior level in executive roles more and more because they were supported with flexibility. And if they are, then I think we'll see more of them flourish at a senior level where they go, look, this is just too much. There are whole industries today where women just do not want to work at a senior level because they don't get the flexibility they need. And they should get that flexibility.
And what about tax breaks for childcare? Is that something you would
that's
support?
something I've always advocated and I've got nowhere on so far. But I think it's really important, especially for more senior women as well.
And how would tax breaks work? Are you suggesting that some of the fees for example, nurseries or nannies comes out at source so the employer
absolutely
pays?
Well, what I would love to do is that you can claim it back on your tax return as a tax break. It would be fantastic if employers could help support it more, but equally so we're in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm not sure commercially that's going to be the easiest thing for them to always do. But if we could get tax breaks on that, I think that would encourage more to stay. This point on what is it going to cost, childcare is expensive, really impacts what families can afford to do. And also, we still are in the situation where if the guy earns more than the girl in a relationship and they've got a child, you tend to find the women giving up more first purely for financial reasons. We don't want that to happen. But the more we can encourage to fulfill their potential, the better, because one day these children grow up.
If you could have your life again, what would you do differently?
I'd have taken a bit more time out when they were tiny, and I would have probably been chief exec for a bit less time, actually. I did a decade. I think that was more than enough, and it really made me quite tired. But actually, what I said to them every year was, look, if it gets too much, tell me. We can always change this. But I probably did it for too long and didn't get some of the quality of life I felt I needed because I was time poor, and you sometimes just need more time. So I see careers as something you can keep adapting and changing depending on your own personal circumstances. And mine certainly said to me, I've done this for long enough and it's time to do some different things. I think as well, because I was then given a life peerage, I think I felt that actually one of my big passions is really helping support individuals in terms of what can we do about policy going forward in some of these areas. So I was really keen to help on that. And also it meant it gave me more. The thing I've craved of, which I think we all want, is more flexibility.
So did your children say to you in the end, actually, we'd just like to see you a bit more, can you ditch that job?
I think they thought I was getting a bit tired. They were going through, quite big critical exams and I wanted to be around more. And they just took the view that said, look, it's up to you, Mum. You need to do what's right for you. It made me realise that I needed to do things differently. And so that was when I decided that it was time to probably stop being a chief executive. And you get to a stage where I think you say, I've done my piece. I've grown quite a lot of shareholder value. I've done enough. And actually, it needs to be a little bit more about me now.
And did that mean that leading up to that, you just felt that you were hankering after more holidays? Did you just feel more fed up?
No, I just felt a bit sad, actually, that I knew that it was going to have to change again. I love what I did, and everyone knows the passion with which I'd build any business I'm involved in. But I needed to do things differently for me and my family, and that was a key part of me saying it's time for change. And best decision I made.
I really enjoyed talking to Ruby. She's such a high-profile businesswoman and someone who I've always respected. And it was a bit of a surprise to me how open she was about her vulnerabilities, how even someone like her had felt insecure when she was coming back to work after having a baby. And actually, that was quite reassuring to hear. I also thought she made some really good points about the cost of childcare and flexibility. And it struck me afterwards that whilst I'm really lucky and have been able to afford to do quite wraparound childcare for me and my family. It makes me really annoyed to think that for some women, the cost of childcare would mean they couldn't go back to work. And for me, I guess I think that everyone needs to have that choice. You should be able to decide whether you want to go back to the office or whether you want to look after your baby at home. And that choice or that decision shouldn't be determined by how much money you've got. She was very open and kind with her advice, actually. Not only did she tell me how vulnerable she had felt and lacking in confidence at times when she returned to work, but she was very reassuring in the way that she spoke about how it will get better. She's kind of like a wise aunt who can kind of pat you on the head and tell you it will be okay when you feel like you're barely kind of holding it together with your baby. Next week, I'll be interviewing Andrea Jenkins MP to find out how she's coped since having her baby, especially in terms of travelling up and down to Yorkshire once a week with her son to be with her constituents, which sounds absolutely crazy, but I'm looking forward to hearing how she's done it. I'd love to hear your stories, so if you'd like to share them, click on the link in the episode description. Subscribe to this feed to make sure you don't miss it. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please do consider supporting our journalism by taking out a Telegraph subscription. You can get your first 30 days for free at telegraph.co.uk/audio.